The crash of two Boeing 747s at Los Rodeos Airport, now Tenerife North Airport, on March 27, 1977, was the deadliest in aviation history. The planes collided on the runway after the departing KLM aircraft started its takeoff run before the taxiing Pan Am aircraft had vacated the strip. 583 lives were lost. But how did this tragedy come to pass? And what has changed in aviation since then? But before we start, if you haven't already, why not subscribe to our channel? New videos are posted weekly. The crash involved two heavily loaded passenger 747s colliding on the runway, operated by KLM and Pan American World Airways. Both aircraft had diverted to the airport that day and were preparing to depart to continue their journeys to Gran Canaria. The KLM aircraft was a 747-200, registration Papa Hotel Bravo Uniform Foxtrot. It entered service with KLM in October 1971, just 6 years prior. That day it was operating KLM Flight 4805 from Amsterdam Schiphol to Gran Canaria. It was flown by Captain Jacob Veldhuizen van Zanten and First Officer Klaas Meers. Also on board was flight engineer Willem Schreuder. It carried 14 crew and 234 passengers on departure from Tenerife. The Pan Am aircraft was a 747-100 with registration November 736 Papa Alpha and named Clipper Victor. It entered service in January 1970 and was operating Pan Am Flight 1736 from Los Angeles to New York JFK and on to Gran Canaria. It was piloted by Captain Victor Grubbs and First Officer Robert Bragg, with flight engineer George Warnes also in the cockpit. It carried 16 crew and 380 passengers. There were several unfortunate contributing factors that day. The first was the fact that neither aircraft was originally intended to be at that airport. Along with several other planes, they had both diverted from nearby Gran Canaria Las Palmas Airport due to a terrorist alert. A bomb had exploded in the terminal, injuring 8 people. The Canary Islands independence movements claimed the attack, and there was a warning about a second bomb at the site. All incoming aircraft were diverted to the much smaller Los Rodeos Airport. The airport only had one runway, one parallel taxiway, and limited aircraft parking. The diverted aircraft were forced to park on the main taxiway, meaning departing aircraft had to taxi into position using the runway. A second contributing factor was the weather. While the diversions had been due to the bombing and not environmental conditions, the weather in Tenerife was not ideal, especially for the increased aircraft traffic. Los Rodeos Airport sits at an altitude of 610 meters, or about 2,000 feet, and is frequently subject to clouds and foggy conditions. This was the case on the day of the accident, with drifting clouds quickly reducing the visibility at the airport. The crash report estimated that the Pan American aircraft had less than 100 meters of visibility on the runway. The KLM aircraft at the other end of the runway had good visibility when it started its takeoff roll, but clouds were moving towards it down the runway. These conditions affected the aircraft's visibility of each other and also the tower's view. Both 747s were departing the airport when the collision occurred. By that time, Gran Canaria Airport had reopened and they were set to continue their flights. The Pan Am flight was ready to depart first as its passengers had not left the aircraft. But Pan Am was blocked from entering the runway by the KLM flight and had to wait for it to be ready. The flight engineer and the first officer actually left the aircraft to measure the clearance, but determined they could not pass, so would have to wait. This was further delayed by the KLM flight fully refueling before departure, a fateful decision, and then having to wait for missing passengers who had deplaned. At 4:56 p.m, the tower gave the KLM aircraft clearance to taxi the length of the runway and line up for takeoff at the other end. And at 5:02 p.m, it gave the Pan Am aircraft instructions to start its taxi along the runway and to vacate at the third exit. So far, nothing unusual for a busy airport area, that was having to use the runway for taxi and flight departures. The Pan Am aircraft did not, however, take the third exit. This would have required two 148-degree turns to reach the main taxiway. It's not clear why this was instructed, but with reduced visibility and unclear instructions, Pan Am continued to taxi along the runway towards the fourth exit. The real problems began when the tower gave KLM 4805 departure instructions. 4 minutes after the tower instructed the Pan Am flight to taxi, at 5:06 p.m., the tower gave departure and routing instructions, but not takeoff clearance. KLM 4805 read this back and finished with, "We are now at takeoff." The captain released the brakes and applied power. The response from the tower, which could not see the runway end due to the cloud, was, "Stand by for takeoff. I will call you." The KLM crew likely missed part of this communication due to radio interference. At the same time, the Pan Am crew radioed, "We're still taxiing down the runway, Clipper 1736. The overlap led to the KLM crew hearing neither critical message, and again, due to the fog, the two aircraft could not see each other. There was one final opportunity to abort the takeoff. The tower asked the Pan Am aircraft to report when it was clear of the runway. This was heard in the KLM cockpit, and the flight engineer twice asked the pilots if the other aircraft was clear. It was not acted on. The KLM aircraft accelerated down the runway towards the Pan Am flight, which was approaching the fourth taxiway. Based on the cockpit recording, it was the Pan Am captain who first saw the aircraft approaching. He applied full throttle and attempted to turn the aircraft left towards the grass. When the KLM crew saw the other aircraft, they attempted to rotate early, as it was already too late to stop the roll. The Boeing 747 left the ground but struck the central upper fuselage of the Pan Am aircraft. With its full load of fuel, the resulting fire was devastating. 583 people died in the collision. All passengers and crew on the KLM aircraft were killed. There were 61 survivors on the Pan Am aircraft, including the flight deck crew. Following the incident, the Spanish Civil Aviation Accident and Incident Investigation Commission, or CIA-IAC, opened an investigation. It determined that the main cause of the accident was the KLM aircraft taking off without clearance. Investigators agreed that the captain believed he had clearance and that the tower thought the aircraft was still waiting at the end of the runway. The report described several other contributing factors, including cloud, fog, and variable visibility conditions, radio interference and difficulty hearing two simultaneous messages, use of non-standard phrases by both the KLM crew and air traffic control, the increased volume of aircraft at the airport, the Pan Am aircraft not leaving the runway at the third taxiway as instructed. There was also discussion about the interaction between the KLM crew. Captain Veldhuizen van Zanten was a senior figure at KLM and the head of pilot training. Investigators suggested that this could have impacted any intervention the crew could have made. They questioned the captain's takeoff decision, but were not insistent. Dutch authorities pushed against the KLM captain taking full responsibility. They argued that the other factors were highly relevant, particularly the missed communications and the Pan Am aircraft continuing beyond where it was instructed to leave the runway. Though KLM did not accept responsibility, it did pay compensation to the victims' families. In the wake of the accident and subsequent investigation, there were many safety changes and recommendations made. The most significant was strengthening the regulations for standard radio communications and English language, as well as requirements for readback of instructions received. Phrases including "we're at takeoff" and the ATC response of "OK" were considered contributing factors to the crash. There were also changes to crew training and management. Crew were now encouraged to work together regardless of seniority and to challenge decisions when appropriate. There were changes at the airport in Tenerife too. Ground radar was soon installed at Los Rodeos Airport, and a second lower altitude airport opened at Tenerife South, or TFS. The events of March 27, 1977 at Los Rodeos Airport in Tenerife were no doubt tragic, but aviation has made many changes to avoid such incidents in the future. Did you know about the Tenerife Airport disaster? What do you think of the changes instituted afterward? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Did you know that we publish over 175 stories every single week on simpleflying.com? Be sure to check the link in the description for more great stories just like this.